I'd like to bring this meeting to order. The Village of Villa Park Board of Trustees Committee of the Whole meeting, July 8th, 2024. Clerk Henneke, please call the roll.
Trustee Alfano. Here. Trustee Cordova.
Here.
Trustee Corkery. Trustee Kozar.
Here.
Trustee Kumar. Trustee Patrick. President Kazone.
Here. Will you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, our first item tonight is a presentation on the parking studies for the historic Ardmore and Old Town Villa districts. And we have representatives from Koenig, Lingray, O'Hara, Abuna, the village's traffic engineering consultants, who will present the findings of the parking assessment study of Old Town Villa and historic Ardmore districts.
Did you? Well, let's go right straight to the to our consultant who will present the studies. Both of the studies have been out in the staff's in the elected officials' hands for just a little bit. It's pretty long. It's a lot of material, but I think it gives us a better perspective of the parking actual needs versus the parking perceived needs. And with that, I will turn it over to KLOA. Right. And
good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here. My name is Javier Milan. I'm a principal with KLOA Incorporated. Just to let you know a little bit about myself, like I said, I'm a principal with over 25 years of experience in traffic and transportation engineering. I have a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering with a concentration in traffic and transportation from Marquette University. I'm also the adjunct traffic engineer for the Village of Lombard, and I'm a member of the Institute of Transportation Engineers. A little bit about KLOA. We were founded in 1995, and we provide transportation and parking consulting services to public and private sector clients. It includes many areas of planning, transportation planning, transit-oriented development plans, corridor studies, traffic studies, parking studies, pedestrian studies. So we provide all these services to public and private sector clients. We're also the village's consultant and are the sub-consultant for the comprehensive plan that it's currently being taken under House of Levine and Associates. And just as a small sample of our public sector clients includes the Village of Villa Park, Village of Lombard, Village of Wheeling, and Village of Bolingbrook, just to mention a few. So we were given the task to do two parking studies for the two, what I call your two downtown areas. There's the Villa Avenue downtown area and also the Ardmore Avenue downtown area. The Villa Avenue downtown area, based on discussions and direction by staff, the boundaries are St. Charles Road to the north, Villa Avenue to the east, Park Boulevard to the south, and Myrtle Avenue to the west. As part of the study, we collected, we basically did a parking inventory. The Villa Avenue downtown provides approximately 181 public on-street spaces, 96 public parking lot spaces, and approximately 367 private parking lot spaces. This brings up the total of parking spaces to 644. So this translates into approximately 60% private lots and 40% public. As part of the study, we actually conducted an occupancy survey every hour on Thursday and Saturday from 9 a.m. until midnight. And this included surveys of the on-street parking, the public parking lots, and the private parking lots. I want to point out, if you look in here on Thursday, in the Villa Avenue downtown area, you can certainly see that at 8 o'clock, the public parking lot utilization tends to go much higher than what you see all throughout the day, and that's certainly because of all the restaurants and bars and nighttime activity that you have in the downtown area. Having said that, there's still parking, but certainly you see an increase in the utilization. As I mentioned, Saturday, we did the same thing too, from 9 a.m. until midnight. And once again, at 8 o'clock, you can see how the parking utilization, for example, in this case, public parking lots, you can see that it's at 88.5, or let's round it, 89% utilized at that time. So overall, the Villa Avenue overall parking utilization on Thursday on daytime, you can see that it's about 60% vacant, 40%, and I'm just rounding the numbers in here, occupied. And you can see that that actually keeps on repeating pretty much all throughout the day. And again, this is overall. This is including public as well as private parking spaces. Now, having said that, we also compiled the Villa Avenue downtown public parking utilization. And what we found is that on a weekday, the peak utilization of public parking, and this includes on-street and off-street in the Villa Avenue downtown area, was about 51%, and that occurred around 8 p.m., with a minimum of approximately 136 spaces still available out of those 277 public parking spaces. On Saturday, the peak utilization of public parking was about 60% and occurred around 8 o'clock again, with a minimum of approximately 104 parking spaces available out of those 277 public parking spaces. With regards to the Ardmore Avenue downtown, the study boundaries were basically School Street to the north, Cornell Avenue to the east, Highland Avenue to the south, and Princeton Avenue to the west. Based on our data collection, Ardmore Avenue downtown area provides approximately 269 public on-street spaces and 444 private parking lot spaces for a total of 713 parking spaces. Again, this translates into approximately 60% private lots and 40% public on-street parking spaces. As it was done with the Villa Avenue downtown parking study, we collected data every hour from 9 a.m. until 12 a.m. on Thursday as well as on Saturday. So overall, the Ardmore Avenue parking utilization, and again, overall means all the parking, private as well as public, is approximately utilized 30%, with as many as 580 parking spaces still available. Now, as it pertains to the public parking utilization, the peak utilization of public parking in the Ardmore Avenue downtown area on a typical weekday was approximately 26% and occur around 1 p.m., with a minimum of approximately 200 of the 269 public spaces still available. On Saturday, the peak utilization of public parking in the Ardmore Avenue downtown area was approximately 42% and occurred at 5 p.m., with a minimum of approximately 157 parking spaces still available at this time. Therefore, given the results of the surveys, KLOA provided staff with the following recommendations to improve parking utilization in the area. We believe that there should be enhanced marketing and wayfinding, and the village could probably develop digital downtown parking maps and develop and implement a wayfinding sign system. This is something that we have seen in other downtown areas to actually guide visitors as to where the parking is. Also, better utilization of Park Boulevard parking and public parking. Once again, better signage, additional pedestrian connections. We believe that there should be some reduction in the confusion. Is it public or private? The public parking spaces for the Historical Society Museum, it's not too clear if it's private or if it's public. Very often, and that includes myself, quite a few years ago, I didn't park there because I didn't know that I could park there. So I'm still driving around trying to find something. So just making it a little bit clearer for the visitors. The parking lots, improving them. A lot of the parking lots, are a little bit in disrepair. And this could involve repaving, restriping, providing some additional landscaping, lighting, or even providing electric charging stations. Pedestrian access. This is something that, again, it happened to my wife and me. We came over to go to one of the restaurants, and we park on Park Boulevard south of the Prairie Path. My wife was not too happy that she had to cross the grass to go into the Prairie Path to then go to the restaurant. And we had to go around. So again, providing some type of connection and install a sidewalk segment in those parking lots would make it much easier for people that are coming to downtown to actually visit them. We believe that valet parking should be encouraged. This is something that the village can work with the businesses to develop a plan. Better utilization of on-street parking at night and on the weekends. We highly encourage removing or restricting the 3-hour time limit. We understand why there is a time limit during the day, but I believe it goes all the way up to 8 o'clock, and at that time, restaurants are still, jamming. So maybe that restriction could be reduced to 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. and then make it more available to the restaurants in the area. And lastly, the elimination of parking requirements for non-residential uses within the MX district. And what do I mean by this? Well, based on the results of the survey, there is plenty of parking available to eliminate the parking requirements for non-residential uses within the Villa Avenue and Armour Avenue downtown areas. By doing that, this would allow for better utilization of the existing parking spaces in the area without creating or putting burden on potential new development. This summarizes what we found, and again, I'll be more than happy to answer the questions. We did this in coordination with staff, and we worked on this, and we went back and forth, but I would be very happy to hear what you guys have to say.
Good. A couple of questions. You said better utilization of Park Boulevard parking. Are you talking in both Ardmore and Villa?
Correct. Mostly, and again, anecdotal because of what happened to my wife and myself, on the Villa, because it's the one that has quite a bit of attractions, in nighttime. But the same thing for the Ardmore downtown area.
Okay. Do you recommend expanding that at all, or do you think there's just enough there?
Just the provision of better connectivity. Like I said, unfortunately or fortunately, the Prairie Path provides almost like a barrier between that parking and whatever is on the north side. So that's why I mentioned that providing those connectivity would actually entice and make it more attractive for people to actually utilize that parking space.
Okay, good. Trustee Alfano.
Thank you. I agree with what you are bringing to board and staff about needing some better signage, especially over by the Rotary Playground on the Prairie Path. It's really hard to tell when you're facing south that that's not, that's public and not private, because it looks like it's supposed to be part of that development,
to me,
right?
yes.
And so you're not sure if you're going to get ticketed or not. One of the questions that I have, I know that this was from 2023. I know that we also now have some spaces that are taken up by eateries and such on Ardmore. I don't know if that's going to continue because there are additional eateries there. If that is something that is reflected in this, where we can have some flexibility there, or if that's something that is going to continue, I'm not sure how that would work in your study. So that's one question that I have. And then you also recommended non-residential usage, which I'm assuming you're for street parking. Do you have particular streets that you are recommending?
Not necessarily particularly, but overall, globally, it is something that, like I mentioned, and as you saw these, there's plenty of on-street parking available. And I think it would be ideal to actually take advantage of that and utilize it for those non-residential uses. It makes it very attractive, once again, for businesses, knowing that there is parking in the area. And I believe, sorry, to answer your first question.
The other one was we do have, and maybe this one might be more for our staff, but we do have some restaurants and eateries that are now taking over some parking. So how is that being reflected in the study?
Sure. As Javier has pointed out, we have a utilization rate of 50%, 60%, and so that's hundreds of parking stalls, whereas the utilization right now is -2. Okay. So it's not factored into this because the data was, as you pointed out, collected last year, and this is the first time they're attempting it for this year, but it's marginal. It's a rounding error as far as the data goes, right? Non-residential no parking standards for non-residential. It's not tied to streets, it's tied to the district. So the mapping that was created for those two particular downtown districts or Old Town, Historic Ardmore, those areas. So the streets would be outlined by a geographic area.
Okay, so, because I know that in the bigger packet, there were some streets that were identified as already having like 90 or 95% usage for a lot of that time
Right.
period. So that was my question.
Yep. Yeah, keep those at that, and then point them to the areas where, through signage, through wayfinding, through digital mapping, where else to go. We don't expect that usage to go down, but maybe the other areas to go up.
Thank you.
Trustee Kumar.
One concept I do like, the fact that you did the study. I just, the data wise, I can't, how many days did you measure?
Correct.
Yeah.
So a full typical weekday, and in this case, it was, and I'll go back, it was Thursday, and from 9 a.m. until midnight, every hour.
Every hour.
And then a typical Saturday from 9 a.m. until
Okay.
until
And
midnight.
then in which month was this done?
This was done in May.
May, okay, okay, that's a pretty high traffic month, and that's hopefully a good standard to get. Also, I have another question about, can you go back to that last slide of yours? You talk about the elimination of parking requirements. What do you mean by that? Are there parking requirements in that area that prevent public parking, and where?
So it's not that it prevents public parking, it's that a restaurant use based on total number of seats has to provide 20 parking stalls. But we have a built environment, which historic 1900 buildings, that if they were to actually provide those 20 required stalls, they would have to buy the building next to it, demo it, and build a parking lot to provide 20 stalls. So there's a conflict really between what the village wants in those particular historic districts and what the code says. So all of them are basically non-conforming right now, and they're continuing to operate it under a non-conforming status, that they have one stall and they continue to provide one stall. But if we're trying to invigorate and create new life in here and new remodels and second-story additions and all those fun things, to accomplish that, you have to essentially eliminate the non-residential parking standards.
My concern is that's fine, but we don't want new buildings coming in that district that don't provide minimum parking, because that doesn't give space for growth. I wouldn't want to just take away the residential, the rules. I would rather address that on a piece-by-piece case, as we have been doing for different things, because if someone new comes in, that just, allows them not to build for the future. Now, any of the older grandfathered buildings, I understand they're not going to be compliant.
Right.
So we may have a law, but we should understand that should only be for new
Yes.
construction, non-new construction, things that are reuses of what's there already, because that is something I would be amenable, but I wouldn't want a new development to come in and say, well, this is the rule and we don't need parking spaces, because that, in the long run, is trouble.
So, yes, and I think there's more conversation to be had on that, but you can actually use the no required parking for commercial businesses and as an economic tool that costs us $0. Because we know that we have 50% availability in parking. That can be through public parking stalls or through street parking. They can actually then activate that space and make it more financially viable for a new project to come in, instead of required, as again, 20 parking stalls, which is just going to be 20 parking stalls. You can actually maximize what's on that site at that point. Because we have a long way to go before we're starting to hit at 100% utilization. Like a long way
I
to go.
understand, I just, the long way can come quickly in a short space. It may not come across the board, right? It's not gonna come across Villa Park, but in a small space,
And I'm only, yeah.
immediately cause a problem. So we don't want an immediate problem in a small space. Yeah. But what we do want is to be very amenable to change and accepting, a park in the lack of requirement. That's the only thing I have issue with, because something I would have a concern with in the long run. Another thing, you said there was like a mapping, we talked about, better signage, this is very important for the people coming in. What also is a reach out to business to say, here's the 10 parking spots kind of that we think your business can go to, and these are the 20. Kind of a reach out mapping wise for them would be very helpful, because I think also a lot of times when you go into a business, they say, park on this street, or park on, at least in the city, they'll tell you where to go. They valet is a great thing, but not everybody valets, it's cost, the cost aspect, just like the 20 spots come in for businesses to come in, not every business needs that. Also, the temporary 10-minute, 20-minute slots, one for business or two for businesses, will be helpful if they're just stop by, get your stuff and go. So I don't know how many we have of those that they can use, that the businesses have.
Yeah, so
or
we
the
actually
requirements.
we actually
Yeah.
discussed a significant amount of what you were talking about right now, and actually we want to take advantage of doing the develop the digital downtown and the wayfinding, because we found out that people are parking their cars well before they enter that business. They want to be able to know exactly where to go before they step foot in that particular
No,
location.
and I completely agree with giving people the green light, because some people, they're just coming in for the first time to the business, they're not gonna walk in. But the business also knowing where you can go is a good thing, so it's a two-way street. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do the digital mapping and tell people, okay, here's a spot, go there, that's absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Trustee Cordova?
This makes a lot of sense, right? 62% on a busy Saturday, I believe it was May something. I just looked at the weather. I think it was like 74 degrees that day. Great.
Sorry, say that again?
Whatever date it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even the May 4th date, which was Thursday, that was 70 degrees. It was perfect, right?
Correct.
Great stats, great data. So if we're only at 62% on a very busy Saturday night, and we have X amount of new businesses going in, we have a new construction going in that's going to have not only the parking that they're going to need, but then also additional public parking. I don't think that was in this, correct?
I almost said the traffic study. The parking study actually included, because, we talked to Mark, the new developments that are coming into the area and the additional parking that will be provided, because it's going to be a net gain. So it includes that. And as we discussed, and I didn't have it here in the slides, but one of the things, for example, the reconstruction of the Lions Park, with some additional parking,
Right.
as well as the additional parking that will be provided, and I forgot the name of the development, but it's there, yeah.
Yeah.
So those additional parking spaces should be utilized. I'm going to talk about the one, Lions Park, and again, this is anecdotal because it has happened to me. The bar, I think, Mo, if I remember correctly,
Yeah.
So the parking lot was full, and I'm like, oh God, where can I park? Now with this additional parking that you guys are providing, it's not that far away from Mo. So encouraging that, hey, there's some additional parking there, you actually use what you have and you activate it. So those things were taken into account. Same thing for the Ardmore. We looked at the new developments, which is the expansion of the Knollcrest Funeral Home, as well as a proposed apartment building on the other area. So we know that some parking spaces might be lost, some will be gained, and again, it still has that high percentage of available parking that can accommodate what we discuss.
Right. And then my second piece, when we talk about wayfinding, I just want to make sure that everybody understands. It's when you say, I'm going to go to, Moore Brewing, right? And it says, here's where you can go. You're not going to go directly to the front of the store, of the restaurant. You're going to go to, you can park here, 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 and you get directions to the parking space as opposed to the restaurant first.
Correct.
Right. So I just want to make sure that, because
Correct.
the
And
wayfinding
that's-
is a very funny little.
That's something that
jargon.
early on we discussed, and he explained to me, I'm sorry, you mentioned it to me, and I'm trying to challenge him, and he explained to me what's going on, and there's some samples of other communities that have done this, and makes it a lot easier for you as a visitor to come in, oh, I know where I can go, I can park over here, I'm
Right.
only a block away, or like 2 blocks away, I'm like, this will work, so that's what we're talking about.
The best example of that is if you do a search for, getting Google Maps or whatever to the airport, you're not going to get
Yes.
dropped off. They're not going to drive you to the
Right.
the American Airlines door. They're saying, do you want to do this one, this one, this one? it's pretty easy, so.
Mark actually mentioned exactly
Yeah,
what you
yeah.
said. You mentioned it. That's why when we were talking about this, it's like, you know what, this will be great. We could do something like this, you know?
Yeah, so better signage, better marketing. It seems like those are easy takeaways.
Those are easy things, and again, the village can work on this. If they need help, we can certainly provide it, you know, but some good signage, you know, some good, you know, banners, you know, that just make it very easy for somebody to say, hey, I'm here, you know, I can turn over there, or I can go, you know, to another parking space.
You know, and people would be willing to walk that extra block if they knew there's parking there.
Correct.
Yes.
People, they don't want to walk the block if they got to walk 2 blocks and maybe 3 blocks. If they say, okay, there's parking a block away.
Correct.
They're willing to walk that extra block that way.
Which is what I have experienced, you know?
Sure. Trustee Kumar.
Okay, so the wayfinding is, I guess it's a program that maps where the parking is, that we can find the parking the day of, the time of, correct? And so that's excellent for people coming in. What I would suggest marketing-wise is a QR code that goes to every restaurant that they can put on their website, so they just click on it, and so they know, okay, I'm going there, where can I park? And then that's all you need from the restaurant perspective, because the first thing you're gonna do is look at the menu, what's there, and when am I going, and then you're gonna think parking. That's what we all think.
And that was included in the study. So,
Yeah.
I mean, the QR codes, that's
Yeah,
something that
the
will go a
QR
long
code,
way.
which just takes you to wayfinding, and once it gets in the psyche of people, that's what they'll be looking at from now on. But it's like a stopgap for like 2-3 months before everybody's on it.
Yeah, that recommendation is in the reports. Yep.
Any other questions?
I had one quick question, which I could have asked ahead of time, but so this is a snapshot of what we have now. And you already are aware that things are changing. The union's going to come in, and I may get my numbers wrong here, but the public space, the public parking lot that's there right now, we have is 47 spots, I think, which I
I
don't.
have the numbers with me if you want me
Yeah.
to go and get them.
Yeah, I was looking at it anyway, and we know there's going to be over 90, like with 94 spots coming in soon, so doubling that amount. But there's a property, Demito's owns some land, which right now has private parking on it. But one of the reasons, if we take away that requirement, that makes that property more valuable because they can develop that without adding parking. The thing is, that's not wrong. That adds value to the downtown. It's we know we have enough parking, but do we have the data? Do we have the understanding? And I'm sure we do that this is going to be dynamic, and we have to keep a count on it. Not requiring parking is more and more the recommendation. If you follow the strong towns and a bunch of different philosophies now, try not to burden one store at a time with the parking, because then you end up with what we have now, which is a lot of private parking, which is reserved for that business only. But
Only for that business.
I guess the point is, this should be able to, with what the data we have here, we should be able to continue to think about this as we go into the future, and we see new development, things, more parking spaces arriving, like at the Union, at the rec center, and going away if somebody develops some of these privately owned surface level parking spots.
Absolutely. This should be dynamic, and we have talked about that. One of the things that Mark actually indicated to me is that just because we agree in basically reducing or removing that requirement for the non-residential uses in MX, doesn't mean that because if a development comes in and they decide that, hey, I would like to provide 10 parking spaces or 12 or 20, it doesn't mean that we're just going to say, no. The code, no, that is not the case. They can also certainly do it. And like it was mentioned, it could be evaluated on a case-by-case basis, depending on the intensity of that use.
Yeah. Trustee Kumar.
I still am not in favor of just blanketing the no parking requirement. One, it is true that, yes, they will provide, but honestly, if I'm a business and running a business, I'm going to try to do the minimum I can, because I want to put as much money into the business that I can. So if I don't need to provide 10, I'm not just going to say, well, let me just give 10 parking spots. That's not what I'm going to do. it does let a lot of businesses come in that couldn't originally, but I would like to think of it more in a case, I don't want to go from 20 down to 0. I just have a feeling in the long run that is going to be a huge thing. Then it becomes the burden of us to put up a public parking space, find a space to put up a public parking, like Elmhurst or any of those other places, they needed to build a parking space later. So I don't know if we have the ability to do that, you know, financially, and it becomes the burden of the village rather than the burden of the developer. I agree, you know, like, if we know there's a lot of space around there on a case basis, and we decide, okay, go ahead, just waive this requirement, I think it should be the vote of the board to waive or not waive that requirement.
Well, that would have to go to planning and zoning anyway.
Yeah.
It would,
It would
community
be a
development
code-
department, they would look at that.
I wouldn't want to write a code that waives the process.
But there are some, because there's existing the businesses on Ardmore where there was a new business coming in. Now it's a building that's there, has no additional parking, and the code required 4 spots, and they only had 3 or something like that. The business couldn't make it there. He couldn't get the occupancy because he didn't have that parking. Whereas, and the parking was intermittent. It wasn't like it was going to be there all day. So because of the code, if it wasn't there, this business could have started, and they didn't because
No,
of
I
the
mean,
parking
it's-
requirement. So there are, yeah, there's
Exception-
downfalls to it, but there's also upsides to it because you could still get businesses in there. And granted, a large development would have to be looked at. You know, we would definitely have to look at something like that. Director would have to be looking at, his department would look at that. But for just a normal business coming in, you know, sometimes it's better not to have that requirement.
Right.
I don't think Elmhurst has requirements, right? Parking requirements?
I'm
at all?
not for sure what Elmer's does or doesn't have. There are,
No,
per-
yeah.
Not for- Okay. Okay. Anything else?
Elmhurst has a huge parking lot, a public parking lot that belongs to Elmhurst. We don't have that, so I don't think we can think in the same way. Everybody knows to go there. So does Naperville. Naperville Center, Naperville is like that too, but, you know, everybody knows to go there to park in their huge parking lot. They have flow over parking. The way, the computer programming, that shall help people, definitely, but
I've been raising my hand for like 2 minutes.
yeah, and I think if and when Union comes in, that shall help, because that's something that people will think of as public parking. It's in the center. All of that is going to help. And I just would like to see how we would want to change the law specifically before I, sign off on that. That's it.
So that thinking is saying we don't want new businesses in Villa Park. Restricting or tying your business size to parking spaces is restrictive to growth of business and commercial businesses in Villa Park. Period, end of story. If a person comes in, they say, we have 10 tables, we're like, okay, that's 40 people maybe that you can have in your store at any point. You're gonna have to have 4 or 12 or 15 new spaces. There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to go. So that person's gonna say, I'm not gonna build here, I'm gonna go to insert any other town around here that doesn't have this restriction to it. That is the biggest way to turn businesses away, outside of maybe 2 more ways. But tying a very landlocked area that is only 62% used on a very busy night to saying you have to have this space. That captain's room that went in, he had 1 space that was there, and I think we made an exception. I can't remember what it was. He would never build that business there. He just wouldn't be able to. There's nowhere else to go. I don't know if Cream and Fuel, I'm not asking you at all, but if there were any kind of, you have to have public, or you have to have spaces there, I don't know if there were. There's a public parking across the street. So that's just how I'm hearing it right now, is if you don't have the space, you can't come here. And we don't have the space. We do have the space, actually. We have about 48%. So that's...
No, it's not that we don't have the space or we have the space. That was never the question at all. It's not that we shouldn't let those businesses. It's, do we let the businesses point blank, or does it come through the board? these are the two things. The board in general is gonna vote for, like, fuel and creme, or any of these things. I think many of them did not have the parking. We voted yes.
Right.
And I
Whatever-
guess it puts it within the board's choice, or is it, do we just point blank let it go?
No, if whatever changes have to be made or are made would come through the board. It has to, because we have to change the ordinances.
No, I'm just talking about the ordinance itself, changing it is, how would we change that? That's what
Yeah, it
I,
would go through community development, then go through planning and zoning, and then it would come to the board for approval.
no, I understand that. The
You're
point
talking
is,
about case by case.
it's a case by case versus.
In that case, then it would come to planning and zoning. Like, in the case of fuel and creme, they went to planning and zoning and asked for the variance to get rid of the parking requirement. And planning and zoning approved it, and then came to the board, and the board approved it.
You voted against it.
I don't know if I did or not. It was a long time ago. But either way, it came to the board for approval. So, okay. Trustee Kozar.
So that's the purpose why we need an ordinance, and we don't need it to come through case by case. Because you're gonna have different people that sit on the board that vote against things for whatever reason, even if it's not well articulated what the reason's for. When I started Fuel and Creme, I came before the board twice. And the first time, I didn't want to have parking on that property because it just didn't make sense. And it was such a hassle. It cost thousands of dollars. And to hear the argument that I should have 5 parking spots on that little piece of property, I mean, it like just wasn't thought out. Whoever made those arguments. And then the second time I came, thinking that that property, I had gotten a variance and that property was now exempt from parking. We wanted to put a rooftop deck up, but the community development director and the manager at the time threw a poison pill in there and said, well, you need approval for no parking if you're gonna have a rooftop deck. So I had to go before the board again, and that's what our president voted against, to deny and require extra parking on that little sliver of a property. So that's why we don't have a rooftop deck. But what we need is an ordinance that existing buildings don't have to comply to this, it's just goofy parking requirement that nobody else is following. It's outdated. It just doesn't make sense for the type of town and the type of business that we want to run. The capital market will determine if it makes sense. If you have a property and you don't have parking and it's difficult to get there, the market will determine whether or not you're going to be in business. There's enough obstacles in business. We don't need a paternalistic government telling us what we can and can't do, or who's going to ride their bicycle or who's going to ride their car. So we need an ordinance for existing properties. Now, my question is staff suggesting waiving the parking requirement on new construction?
Yeah, so the recommendation is waiving the parking requirement for non-residential. So
Right.
a resident, if they are going to provide a second or third story apartments or condos, whatever, those parking requirements will be in play and have to be provided on site, but not for the first floor commercial or retail, because per our data, we have an abundance of public parking available in those two particular areas. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm less enthusiastic about the new construction because you do have some control over it, but I understand the point, and I'd be totally fine with new construction, non-residential. And I think what we should do is change our ordinance, be more business friendly to that aspect of it, and then if down the road, 5 years, 10 years down the road, we determine we have an issue with it, let's address that issue. Or not wait 10 years. If we have an issue in 1 year, in 2 years, let's address that issue as they come up. But you can sit here all day and decide, oh, you know, here's all these hypothetical problems, but hypothetical problems are not real problems. And the market, customers will determine what makes sense and what doesn't.
Okay, well, a few comments. Trustee Kumar.
I understand Trustee Kozar's point. I'm still a bit wary. I would be up for definitely old construction, anything old, waiving the rules makes 100% sense. you're not gonna get 4 parking spaces when there were 3 to begin with. It's just not happening. Okay.
That's the
So
dilemma.
that's something that I would be 100% favorable waiving all the way. Now, for new construction, I would not be against that either. I would think about it a little bit. I would put a cap on what's happening with our parking studies, because you don't want to address the problem when you're 100% full. That will be a problem. You need to have more consistent data collection, and when you're 80% full is when you need to address this problem. Otherwise, anything going in is going to be a problem the day it hits the ground. So that's my concern with the new construction, the law. Because our town has this problem. Until it gets really bad, we don't address problems. So we don't want to get back to that mess, right? So at 80% itself capacity, I understand we're at 50 now, but the 50 also, as you say, includes 100 and something spaces that we're going to get from Union.
No.
Not.
No. What you seen there was the actual survey. What we're saying is that there's going to be an additional supply of parking based on what's coming up to the Union and also based on what's being done at the Lions Park. But what you see in the bar charts, that's just existing. That's not including that additional parking that is being
Okay,
provided.
so then our plan of action in that case for these, at least these central districts, I'm guessing, if we're going to waive or whatever we're waiving, and we have a lot of old buildings there that we want to develop right away, I understand that, is going to be the Union parking, whatever comes in, if we're getting to 80% capacity or whatever as a flow over, plus our new community center parking, plus we have that extra space in the community center to develop in case we need parking in the future. So this is gonna be, I just like to plan out the future. That's how I think. I don't like to think just, okay, we're here, let's fix the problem today, tomorrow, whatever happens, happens. That's not, what happens with that is you get to a point of like real constriction and very angry people. So we don't want our customers who are the Village of Villa Park to be angry at any point. We want them to have happy solutions. We also want businesses to come in. So I would suggest that code be tied to some kind of parking consistent survey, so that the code is tied to that in some way, just like you did here. So we see the 50%. If we hit that 80%, then we revisit the code, or, it gets sent back to the board, or henceforth, after that point happens, we don't give a free ticket
Well, that's
for
what-
development.
Director McLaughlin's working hard at that, and that's why Javier's here, so.
Right.
Okay. If you have no other questions, thank you very much
you
for
very
coming here
much.
tonight. Appreciate it. A lot of hard work there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Director McLaughlin, thank you. Okay, item B on our agenda is update on Lufkin Park. Manager Harline.
The board requested information about modifying the bandshell stage at Lufkin Park to accommodate larger performances. Very preliminary drawings and costs are presented here. One of the potential uses mentioned was for the St. Genesius Production Incorporated Theater Group. They have produced Shakespeare in the Park for the last, I believe, 3 summers after they were forced outside during COVID. They have plans to work indoors this summer and quite possibly next summer. Staff's available to answer any questions. I will say that I did have a conversation with Sarah Corkery, and I think one of the things that that the size of the stage is an issue. The availability of bathrooms, air-conditioned space to dress like they have right now at the Rugard Pavilion is as big or bigger an issue. And I think that she was very favorable to the idea of exploring using the Cortese Park stage. There are some questions about how they would set up and be able to run tech rehearsals, because the tech rehearsal, dress rehearsal, you need all of the lights and et cetera, and the tech rehearsal, because it's a rehearsal, runs 1.5 to 2 times as long as the production, and you need to leave things in place. If they need to extend the stage forward, they have to put foot lighting, that sort of thing. the available building next door would be excellent for that. But so there is no crisis in terms of needing more space right away. So I did want to put that in terms of St. Genesius players. And I think Director Gola has some ideas of the programs that he was expecting to run at the band shell as designed. And if there's any other questions about Lufkin Park, you can advance them now. And that's all I had to say. Go ahead.
Okay, it's not, it was never, okay, I'd like to clarify here.
Okay.
That Lufkin Park, Shakespeare in the Park is one thing. I just believe we spent $77,000 on running, what Director Gola is saying is just 1 or 2 programs. That's a lot of money to spend for that. And so I like the fact that you came back very soon with a plan. Now, do I think we should implement this plan today? Absolutely not. I think it's something to think about for the future. My personal opinion is I saw in the plan a certain, I think, a drawing plus the plan itself is some $1,000 to $2,000 to actually get a concept plan drawn and ready. That's as far as I would think I would be willing to go at this point as the village, given that we don't really have the money for much more than that at this point. But I think it's important to think, again, for the future. I think that space should not be only used for one thing. One thing is Shakespeare in the Park, so we move Shakespeare in the Park, but that's not the only thing that runs in the Villa Park, and I'm hoping, like, the orchestra from Willowbrook will go play there. I'm hoping that things in Willowbrook will move over there. Lots of things will happen. I know you guys don't like it, who live around there, but there's things that will happen over there. That's the point of a park.
Excuse me, sir.
What's that? Yeah, you can reel them out of more. You can, sorry. Sorry, I'm trying to get you, stop the interruption, so. Go ahead.
It's tiny. It's tiny. It's not gonna run anything. So what is it for? We spent $77,000 on a tiny structure.
Hang on. Dr. Gola, you want to?
Good evening, thank you. Well, one of the ideas, we do movies in the park, and we do several of those a summer. We also do the Super Sensational Saturday mornings, that would be over there. So it'd be more than 1 or 2 events. And then we would program accordingly. But we usually have a magician, or we used to do afternoon adventures at the Iowa Community Center. That can be held over there. So there's several options that we can do. It's just not 1 or 2 events a summer. But
So how many events per year,
well, I think right now we do 2 or 3 movies in the park. So the movies in the park would be there. The Super Sensational Saturdays. The library does their summer reading. They've done that over at Lufkin, so we do this, continue to do work with the library over there. So, I mean, minimum, there'd be 10 events, 9 events.
Okay.
And then we continue to program as we go along.
Yeah.
And then the other idea is, if we needed, same with the Shakespeare in the Park, what they do now is they add on, they build their own stages in the front of the room yard. That was one of the ideas too.
No, and that's, up to them if they build or not build. I'm not really concerned about that so much. What I am concerned about is that we put all this money into what I think is not a really usable space. And that was concerning from day one. And it's not gonna be well used, in my opinion. And, what is it for then? So we gotta plan it out.
There's a lot of things that'll go in there. Trustee Cordova?
Yeah, so Super Sensational Saturdays, movie in the park, probably magician, library things. I mean, Lufkin was never really made. Hang on,
He's talking.
Lufkin was never made to be the main stage of Villa Park, right? We had community input, and I've seen some of you people in there, some of our fellow residents in there, talking about what they wanted. One of the things that on the Park and Rec committee was, or a commission, was we should do what the fastest growing sport in America and almost the world is pickleball. And that community came through and said, that's gonna be too loud. We also don't want very bright colored playground equipment. They wanted a very natural feel to it. So we did that, right? And then when we go through and understand the cost of it, which was, I guess, $77,000, to make it to what it looks like that you want or that is wanted here is $9,000 for a concrete slab. For composite decking is $27,000. Another $2,500 just to design it. And then $30,000 for this changing room and green room. That's expensive. That's another $68,500 to make that screen or to make that that shell or that band shell into a performance shelter. That's not what that community wanted, and that's what we did. We had a huge community input, 3 of them, and they said we don't want too many loud things, and that's what went in there.
Good. Trustee Kumar.
I was at all 3 of those community input meetings, and none of them said what they wanted of that sort. So I don't know where you got that
I
information.
moderated it.
I know, I was at all of them. Nobody said, we do not want this or that. Actually, a picture came up of what we wanted at that point, which I said, which was up there that everybody saw. Okay, and it is not, it was a wooden structure. It was quiet. It was not meant for this concrete, whatever they put up there in the first place. So that's not what was expected either by me. What came up is a concrete structure with none of the possible things that were on here. And so I was at all those meetings. It was Lufkin is a very passionate thing for me because we lost a pool there. The pool wasn't a quiet place. Honestly, the pool was pretty loud. There was like 500 people there, and that was a pretty loud thing. I understood the pickleball issue. Pickleball is not only the sound of the issue. And we got a lot of pickleball courts coming in here and there. That's not an issue at all now. The point is, whatever structure we put in, it should have a multi-use. Now, do we do this now? Absolutely not, because you're right, it's gonna cost us 68. Do we plan for something in the future? Probably we should.
Yeah, and we'll see how the next 2 summers go. We'll see what goes in there. Okay.
I'd like to see all the programming that's going to be there, and I'd like to attend it and see how much that space is used.
Yeah, well,
Because that is my concern. Why did we put so much money into something that's really not being used for a lot of things?
Yeah, and that's what Director Gold was working on,
Yeah.
on getting stuff in there. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Seeing none, we will open up for public comments. Do we have anyone signed up for public comments?
Yes, I have Joanna Moore, referring to the B item.
Good evening, board members. My name is Joanna Moore. My husband, Frank Moore, we live at 1001 South Rand Road. We've been there December of 2020, and we've done a ton of work. We just put our concrete our concrete patio is huge, obviously. It was approved by Villa Park and permits and everything, so we did not pay $9,000. I was listening to Mrs. Kumar here. So going back to the issue, born and raised in Chicago, coming here for, quiet. My husband is a garbage man at Waste Management. I am a paralegal for 30 years. My son is almost 30 years old. So we come here for peace and quiet. We've already lost view. We loved the park. We loved the view, to sit in our backyard. I now have my 90-year-old mother living with us, which is why we built the huge outdoor living, because it's not a fact of children. I have a son myself. My thing is the amount of money being spent, which Mrs. Kumar had expressed to. Something like it shouldn't cost that much. Why is there a green room, IT green room? Those are used for newscasting, broadcasting in the news. What are we going to do in the winter? What about the adults? What about something for the adults? What about using that money for the parking, the 45-minute discussion we had about the parking agenda? That money could be used for that. What about security and maintenance? As everyone could see, we are right in the back of that. The shell is not you can't take it down, you can't put it anywhere else. So if you're going to expand it, we've lost all view. That's what we took down the trees, we made it accessible, and I don't know, I guess we're gonna move now because it's ruined for us. I just hope that money, 30,000, could be used for something else. Was that a grant? Are us taxpayers paying for that? Security, what's gonna happen in the winter? I don't know. I just think that was a big letdown. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Okay, next person I have is Robert Wagner. Same item, 3B, or 2B.
Thank you. Very interesting presentation on the parking study, and was glad to hear that we have adequate parking. The one question that I had, and I'm sure there's a whole group of people who are asking the question, what about bike parking and the connection between bike parking and vehicle parking? So if you have adequate bike parking, that will make, reduce the pressure on parking automobiles. What about wayfaring signage for bicyclists? I mean, you've got this, it's quite obvious, there's trails that go bisect those two areas, and the county did a study, there's thousands of bikes going down those trails. So I think it's a shortcoming of the study that they didn't look at bike parking as well, and what are minimum requirements for bike parking. Thank you.
Thanks.
I have no one else signed
Okay,
up.
anyone else who would like to speak? Sure. Please state your name and sign in there, please.
Sure, my name is Rebecca Williams. I can do that in a minute. Listening to the parking, I read a while ago that downtown are drawn to by murals, and I tried to win one for the city last year, but I did not win, so different topic. In regards to the park, we've lived here about 6 years now, right on the park, and we are actually the house where that proposed drawing of that room off the back would come immediately off the path into our backyard on the corner there. So we're not wild about the idea, but I just wanted to bring a few things that my husband and I had discussed. I believe the project is already over budget as is, and so it doesn't seem responsible as I just think about it as a taxpayer to be adding things to that. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I was at those original meetings about what was in the meeting. I do remember there being a small structure. I do remember specifically commenting to someone, and it might have been you, Mr. Cordova, I'm not sure, that we were hoping that wouldn't be wired for sound, that it wouldn't be huge, that it would be something that was, I don't know exactly what all the use would be. I know that the theater productions were discussed, but we were hoping that wasn't something right in the back of the park there that was going to be super loud with children that live back there and all that, realizing that occasionally things will happen. I think originally there was a potential of privacy plantings for the people, a budget for privacy plantings for the people living on the park. I don't know if that was still in there or not. One of my neighbors mentioned that. I could be incorrect. But I would love to see that still be able to happen in terms of budgeting. As a homeowner, we are at a loss of some green space with that structure there, and this would just inhibit that more. So as we sit back on our decks and view from outside, that would be less attractive. I think as a property value, I'm concerned with that being right butted up to my yard as well, property value-wise, to have that sitting there. I'm a little worried about it from a safety standpoint too, which might sound over dramatic, but as a parent of small children, that's in the back, it's not lighted, it's not secure, untoward activities, potentially in a place that could be locked or not locked, I don't really know, but I'm not wild about another structure going in there that butts right up to the property there with less supervision, less lighting back there. As a parent, we would like to see the park opened sooner rather than later, in terms of not having more ongoing things. My kids would love to get using it as well. So I think between value and sound and fiscal responsibility, and I think even maybe maybe overproductive, but a safety concern. We would like to see that not be expanded. It sounds like there are some other venues within the village that could be used. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else?
Well, Tucker, I believe the description you're talking about is this one?
Yes. No, that's,
Yeah, that's the one that was proposed
yeah.
at that, for the purchase recommendation, and at that time, it was 37,485. That was without the shelter. So
You
the shelter
state your
went
name,
down to
just for the
32.
record, please.
But my question
Cheryl?
on, yes.
State your name, please.
Oh,
Sorry.
Cheryl Tucker, sorry. My concern is that, as you brought up, that we have Cortese Park, already has the stage, already has the shelter. There already has the bathroom facility and a changing part in the building of the depot. When we made the decision, I was on the board at this, when we were talking about this for the planning, that this shelter was supposed to be just set up, that possibly picnic tables would be moved over there at one time, that people could sit under the shelter for picnic tables before we decided on building on the big shelter where the water, pad is. That it could be used for family events rather than them simple gatherings for events to be rented out as a family gathering rather than them having to use the big area where the splash pad was and everything else, which was set up for the public, that it would be a small area for families to rent out that shelter and use that with tables and stuff being put under it, instead of construction. And I'm sure, and there was a lot of discussion at some of the planning things, I understand you didn't, that the residents in that area were concerned that we were going to put loud music out of that or big speakers connected to that performance shed. And they were concerned, living in the area, that it would end up being very noisy and not conducive to them living there. So when we put it in that spot, we took that into consideration, not to have a lot of noise there. It was just an addition to the amenities that were already being put in Lufkin Park, just to add on to it so that we had other things going on to also use that park to the fullest amount. And that is what I wanted to point out to you, that there are more places in this village to do it rather than add a shed to the back of it, add an extension out to it, which isn't really going to be appealing because this park was put into the concept of being a natural park to blend in and not be an eyesore.
Okay, thanks, Cheryl. Okay, any other comments?
Donna Knox, and I'll keep this simple and short. I just overall don't think it's financially responsible. I think if you ask the residents of Villa Park, they would like to see trees throughout the village be replanted because we have taken an abundance of trees down, and they'd like their sidewalks fixed before they add a dressing room to a shelter. I think those would be more important to residents.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anyone else?
Tom Birch. I also live on the park. I'd just like to kind of summarize that clearly what's built is not what you may have intended originally. But it seems to me throwing good money after bad to try and recreate something that's not going to work. I also want to reiterate what Mr. Harlan said, talking to somebody who actually puts on these plays, that even if you built what you're planning on building, it wouldn't be appropriate without the air conditioning, the lighting, et cetera, et cetera. So the whole notion that this is somehow going to be renovated into a theatrical location doesn't make sense. And I would encourage you guys just to, I live right there, go see what the layout looks like. I don't even know how you could fit that something behind there. Just walk behind it. Take a walk through your park. It's looking really good. Excited to see it open, but I just want to add my opinion that it's a bad idea to do it, and for a variety of reasons.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Trustee Alfano, do we have a second?
I'll make that motion.
Trustee Kumar? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we will adjourn and we will reconvene our regular meeting at, make it 7:15.